When everything falls silent, two lions appear. In the heart of the African savannah, where the wind whispers stories and birds observe from above battles rarely seen by humans, two lions emerged. No sound rises above their roar, and no shadow dares approach the arena of confrontation. One lion carries in his eyes the weight of the years, the wisdom of wars, and a past in which he fought every battle as if he already knew the outcome. The other, like a block of iron, knows no mercy and never hesitates to strike. A moment of silence, then a long gaze separating a bloody past from a future that spares only the victor. In this legendary encounter between Makulu and Dreadlocks, power meets wisdom, and all the lessons of the wild are summoned to decide a battle where there is no place for weakness. And everything we tell now leads to that moment. The showdown from which there is no escape. When all chapters are closed and a single chapter begins, where no one returns the same. So stay with us until the end, because the end will be the beginning of the greatest duel. Who is Makulu? The wise leader. Makulu was born in 1998 in a legendary pride known as Sparta. From a very young age, he faced existential battles with hyenas and fierce lions competing for resources. He wasn't just a lost cub, but a leader in the making, destined to defy the very laws of nature. Makulu wasn't only strong in body, but also in resolve. When he went missing as a cub and later returned to his pride to find rejection in the eyes of some, he didn't break. Instead, he turned isolation into training and exile into fuel until he became the pride's primary weapon. He led his first battles against the Split Rock and Milwaukee Lions while still in the prime of his youth. Then, he orchestrated an exceptional alliance of 5 brothers, forming the fiercest pride the Sabi Sands had ever known, the Mapogo coalition. But the greatest challenge to his leadership wasn't his enemies, it was his own brothers. When Mr. T dared to challenge his authority, Makulu didn't back down. He fought him, defeated him, and proved that only those who have faced the hell of hard decisions are fit to lead. Makulu was more than a leader. He was a commander whose name carried weight. Who is Dreadlocks? The destructive force. In a ruthless world, where life belongs to those who strike first and destroy without remorse, Dreadlocks was born. This lion never sought leadership, nor did he care for attention. He was more like a hidden soldier, a silent war machine. But when he moved, nothing in his path survived. Dreadlocks was born into the Sparta pride between 2001 and 2002, in a harsh environment that shaped his body before it shaped his soul. From an early age, he was known for his massive frame and fangs like axes. Unlike Makulu, he wasn't interested in leadership. He was content being the executing hand, the crusher who finished the job, the terrifying force advancing in silence. Makulu was 2 years older, but Dreadlocks quickly proved his worth in combat. While other lions chased gazelles or buffaloes, he went after hippos and towering giraffes, as if death itself was his favorite opponent. Lions of the savannah, challenges and battles that forged legends. In the African savannah, leaders are not born. They are forged in fire. Battles, scarcity, and ever-present death are what shape true lions. Makulu grew up amid fierce competition from his cousins and under the watchful eyes of lionesses who showed no mercy to weak cubs. He found himself surrounded by enemies on all sides, lurking hyenas, rival lions vying for control, and even pride mates who rejected his return. He had no choice but to assert himself through intelligence, not just muscle. The savannah was his classroom, and his battles were his textbook. from which he emerged not only a fighter, but a wise lion who knew when to strike and when to wait. Dreadlocks, on the other hand, lived in a world that only believed in survival of the strongest. Older lions constantly tested him, and with each battle, he proved his body was a relentless fighting machine. Violence was his language, destruction his method. He didn't care whether he was smart enough to lead. He just wanted to be the opponent that even monsters feared at first glance. Both lived through hell, but each in their own way. Between one shaped by wisdom and another forged by steel, two legends emerged, ready for their final clash. Lessons from the savannah. What makes a leader? In the world of beasts, strength alone is not enough to make a leader. Leadership in the savannah isn't given to those who kill the most, but to those who know when to retreat and when to fight to the last breath. Makulu wasn't just a brave warrior. He was a leader who knew how to maintain balance in a pride torn by ambition. When the coalition fractured and the hearts of his brothers leaned toward conflict, Makulu stood against them all. He reasserted his dominance after a brutal battle with his brother, Mr. T, the lion known as the Devil. At that moment, he proved that a true leader does not back down, even from those he loves, because leadership sometimes means choosing between blood and tears. As for Dreadlocks, he was always on the front lines. He didn't care much for managing the coalition, but he was always present in the major battles, like a sword that precedes words. His bravery was undeniable, but it wasn't enough to create balance within the pride. And when conflicts intensified, Dreadlocks chose to stay with the leader, Makulu, because he understood that a true leader isn't the one who shouts the loudest, but the one whose voice is heard, even in silence. Those pivotal moments are what define the difference between raw power and wisdom. Makulu versus Dreadlocks, the moment of collision. Heavy steps shake the ground. Dreadlocks emerges from the trees like a moving wall, his muscles tense, his eyes burning with challenge. Every movement in his body is built to strike, to crush, to destroy. He doesn't just roar, he declares war. On the other side stands Makulu, still, unblinking, unmoving. His eyes move ahead of his body, watching, calculating, and waiting. Makulu doesn't need to show his strength. His strength is revealed in stillness. And here, the narrator's voice is heard. In this clash, strength alone is not enough. Dreadlocks will land the first blow, and it will be devastating. His muscles were made for destruction, and his attacks know no mercy. But now he faces someone who relies not on muscle, but on intelligence and timing. Makulu doesn't defeat his enemies with brute force, but with a plan. He will wait for the perfect moment to bring Dreadlocks down with a single decisive move. Yes, Makulu will be wounded, but in the end, he will win. Because wisdom always triumphs over violence, and the true leader knows how to end the fight. Psychological and tactical analysis of Makulu was not just a traditional leader driven by instinct. He was an exceptional mind inside a lion's body. His decisions weren't impulsive. They were built on precise observations of the terrain, the state of the enemy, and even the behavior of his brothers within the coalition. He tested the patience of the lions around him and assessed their reactions during tense moments to determine who belonged on the front line and who needed to be sidelined to preserve the coalition's balance. Psychologically, Makulu carried within him layers of tension born from losing his brothers in battles, or to humans. Yet he never allowed grief to distract him. He turned pain into a silent strength that grew stronger with every loss. His leadership was built on inspiration, not coercion. Lions followed him because they saw in him what they didn't see in others. a lion who never wavered in storms and never left the battlefield until he ensured everyone was safe. The dark side of Dreadlocks, when strength becomes a flaw. Despite his massive size and exceptional ferocity, Dreadlocks didn't always choose the smartest battles. He was often driven by reactions rather than strategy, frequently rushing in without thinking about the consequences. Many of the fights he engaged in were unnecessary, mere reflections of an internal anger that was never fully understood. At times, he lacked a broader vision, disrupting the coalition's formation with erratic solo actions. And when the coalition began to fall apart, Dreadlocks had no plan to preserve it. He retreated behind Makulu and became a follower after once being a terror. His physical strength remained, but his effectiveness as a leader, or even as a core part of the team, began to fade. In the end, his strength alone wasn't enough to prevent his fate from being sealed by a decision, not a blow. The power of alliances, and who made whom. You can't talk about Makulu and Dreadlocks without mentioning the coalition that brought them together, which formed a crucial part of their strength. The Mapogo coalition wasn't just a group of strong lions. It was a complex structure of roles and responsibilities. Makulu was the intellectual backbone, while Dreadlocks was the hammer that struck when ordered. But who made whom? Did Makulu make the coalition, or did the coalition make Makulu? The clearest truth is that Makulu never needed anyone to prove his leadership. He was born in the heart of conflict and raised through war. Dreadlocks, despite his might, only truly emerged under the coalition's shadow. When Mapogo dissolved, Makulu remained in the spotlight, leading, confronting, maneuvering, while Dreadlocks' aura gradually faded until his story ended in relative silence. Makulu x Dreadlocks. The end of comparison, the birth of a legend. Perhaps Dreadlocks was fiercer, and maybe his blows dropped enemies before they could flee. But in the world of the wild, and in the pages of history, only minds that led and souls that endured are remembered. Makulu was that soul. He led a pride that crushed everything in its path, but never allowed chaos to consume him. He fought enemies from outside, enemies from within, and even his own brothers when necessary. Dreadlocks? He was a beast, no doubt, but he didn't last until the end. And between those who fight to survive and those who plan to be remembered, the victor is always the one who knows how to read tomorrow's battlefield. In this comparison, in this battle, and in the hearts of all who followed their story, the true victor is Makulu.
In the heart of the savannah, where life is measured by roars and death by silence, a lion was born. He wasn't the strongest nor the fiercest, but he was the smartest, the most steadfast and ambitious. He faced kings, saw empires collapse, and walked over their ashes like an invincible shadow. Perhaps he didn't seek the throne nor chase glory, but he engraved his name in the memory of the wild in a way no one ever had before. He wasn't just a lion. He was a legend, walking on 4 legs. A ghost that survived the jaws of death and emerged with pride from the heart of battles without bowing to his opponents. This is the story of Pretty Boy, the lion who chose to live free when others chose to die for glory. In this thrilling documentary, we won't just watch, we will feel, we will tremble, and we will respect the greatness of silence and the strength of the one who remains after the roar fades. Get ready. You are about to enter the world of the Mapogo lions, some of the most brutal and blood-soaked lions in the pages of history. Before the emergence of the famous Mapogo coalition, Pretty Boy lived an ordinary life in the wildlands that would later become part of their empire. He wasn't known by that name yet. He was a young lion, still relying on his pride, learning the laws of survival in the wild. the scent of the wind, the danger of crocodile-filled rivers, and the meanings behind roars coming from afar. He watched the older males from a distance, sensing the hierarchy of power, witnessing the cruelty that came with it. He learned early that the world was not ruled by justice but by dominance. His mother cared for him, and his siblings played with him. But the safety of childhood was temporary. All around him, the wild was merciless. Hyenas lurked, and rival males invaded. One day, the dominant male who protected them disappeared. Perhaps he was expelled or killed. From that moment, everything changed. A shadow began to loom over his pride. Over time, the bonds between him and his pride began to weaken. He felt the change in the way adult lions looked at him. They no longer saw a cub, but a rising threat. As with all young males, he was expelled from the pride by the law of nature. He began wandering alone, avoiding stronger males, surviving on leftover kills, searching for a purpose. During his journey, he met others like him, exiles, cubs cast aside by life who chose solitude. Among them were those who would later be known as Mr. T, Kinky Tail, Rasta, Scar, and Makulu. At first, they formed fragile bonds, not out of friendship, but survival. They needed each other. They had nothing. And yet, the future was open before them. With every challenge they faced together, their bond grew stronger. As for Pretty Boy, the silent observer, he began to understand the power of unity. Their lives had changed from being lonely and empty, with no food, no land, no females, into a strong, united group. Their presence together changed everything. When they moved as one, other lions took notice, hyenas fled, and herds scattered swiftly. Indeed, the group began to move with clear goals. They entered lands ruled by dominant males, testing boundaries. Pretty Boy felt the thrill of danger, but also something else. He realized they were not just wandering lions, they could become rulers. It started with nighttime scouting missions, stealing kills and leaving signs in lands not their own. Over time, some of them grew more aggressive, especially Mr. T and Kinky Tail. Their intentions focused on attacking an old coalition in the east. They heard the roars of a pride ruled by aging males and cubs, an ideal opportunity. Pretty Boy wasn't loud or expressive, but he fully understood what the rest of the group wanted. This was their moment. If they succeeded, they wouldn't just survive, they would rule. So he looked at his 5 companions, each carrying their own scars, hunger and determination. There was no going back. The wild had cast them out, but they would return this time as invaders. Despite the rising momentum among the young lions, Pretty Boy may have hesitated. The recklessness of Mr. T and Kinky Tail troubled him. Their aggression and obsession with dominance clearly revealed their brutal nature. He had seen what happens to those who rise too quickly. The wild knows well how to slowly humiliate them. Perhaps he silently questioned whether this coalition was truly a path to survival, or a suicide led by reckless ambition. He didn't seek bloodshed for blood's sake. He knew what war between lions meant. Cubs slaughtered, mothers torn apart, males fighting to the death. He had seen it as a cub. He had smelled the scent of rotting wounds and corpses left behind by fallen kings. Later, when the moment came, when they neared enemy territory, Pretty Boy remained calm, while the others roared with excitement. Some surely noticed his silence, especially Scar, who didn't think he was ready. But Pretty Boy avoided him. Deep down, he didn't want war, but he had no choice. He knew he couldn't face the wild alone again. As for Makulu, the oldest among them, he wasn't the loudest or most violent either. His strength was in his long experience and sharp focus, reflected in the way others moved when he stepped forward. Pretty Boy watched him closely to learn. Makulu had survived horrors no one else had seen. He carried the calm of a lion who had faced death and returned stronger. One evening, before the first real confrontation, Pretty Boy found himself walking beside him. There was no fiery roar, only silence. Their steps in the dark were accompanied by the distant sounds of herds, while Makulu pressed forward with deep determination and one phrase echoing in his mind: "Either we do it together, or we don't do it at all." Those words were enough. He didn't promise them victory, nor glorify the fight. He only thought of their unity, the only weapon they had against the cruelty of the wild. Alone, each one of them was doomed. But united, as 6 strong lions, they could become something else. Something never seen in lion coalitions before. In that moment, Pretty Boy realized that the presence of Makulu gave him stability and resolve. He didn't need to roar the loudest or lead the charge. He only had to stand with his brothers when the moment came. And that moment was coming fast. And so, the 6 males entered enemy lands under the cover of darkness. The scent of the dominant males was still present, but faint, a sign of their weakening hold. The pride they targeted quickly surrendered, previously protected by kings whose strength had faded and influence had withered. At that time, their coalition had no name yet. They weren't the Mapogo. They were just 6 young males, driven by hunger and led by the goal of survival. Their first fight came quickly, roars tearing through the night as the aging males charged at dawn, trying to defend their legacy, but they were no match. One was killed instantly, the other fled. The weak cubs were crushed between the jaws of these 6 killers. The lionesses initially joined the aging males and fought fiercely, but soon surrendered. The coalition claimed the pride with ease and force. Pretty Boy fought alongside his brothers with a silent but ruthless style. He didn't indulge in chaos like Mr. T, who ripped through enemies with savage intensity. Instead, he was precise, strategic, striking where needed, retreating when necessary. When it was all over, he didn't celebrate. He stood at the edge of the plains, gazing over the land that now belonged to them. One by one, they snatched prides from their enemies. Their reputation spread like wildfire. Lions across the region whispered about the black-maned ghosts who left no cub alive, no king breathing. Pretty Boy was there in every battle, every roar, every moment the balance of power shifted. He was no longer a wanderer, no longer hesitant. He had become a conqueror, a member of the most feared coalition in modern wild history. Yet, in quiet moments, he still carried the burden of this path, what it had cost and what it would cost. The future wasn't lit with glory. He preferred survival and caution over arrogance. As the land expanded, so did the challenges. Dominance was not peace, but the beginning of a new war, a war of patience and endurance. The Mapogo coalition controlled vast territories, commanding several prides, pushing their borders further than any group had dared before. But each day was a new test. Pretty Boy quickly learned that strength alone wasn't enough to keep the throne. Tension began to rise within the coalition. Mr. T and Kinky Tail were always pushing for more. Insatiable, relentless, more brutal and unpredictable. Rasta and Scar became more isolated. Makulu tried to keep order, but barely succeeded. In the heart of this storm, Pretty Boy stood firm. He was respected because he never let bloodlust consume him. The lionesses trusted him more than the others. He was often seen lying close to cubs, alert but non-aggressive. He was the opposite of the chaos the others brought. Meanwhile, enemies were everywhere. Nomadic males trying to sneak into Mapogo lands, former kings plotting revenge, young coalitions forming in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. But Mapogo's response was always brutal. They tore their enemies apart with terrifying speed. Pretty Boy was always present. He might not have started the fight, but he never missed one. His presence balanced the scales. If Mr. T was fire and death, Pretty Boy was control and command. One day, one of their toughest challenges came from 3 strong young males circling the borders of their land. They were bold, organized, a clear sign that the new generation was watching and learning. Still, the Mapogo chased them relentlessly. But the message was clear. Time was shifting, and the balance would soon tip. Inside the coalition, cracks had already begun to spread, especially when Mr. T and Kinky Tail broke off, forming their own unit and leaving the others behind. That left Pretty Boy with Makulu, Rasta, and Scar. It wasn't just a split, it was the start of a collapse, a fracture in a fortress built on resolve and blood. Yet Pretty Boy survived every hardship, from enemy attacks to internal conflict. But the real challenge had yet to come. The challenge wasn't conquest. It was holding on to what was slowly falling apart. Time passed. The group that once seemed unbreakable had now fractured. Mr. T and Kinky Tail were operating separately, while the other 4, Pretty Boy, Makulu, Rasta, and Scar, defended what was left of their territory. The unity that made them an unstoppable force had started to crumble. The world around them was changing. The weight of past battles began to wear down their spirits. Pretty Boy stayed close to Makulu. They were more balanced and less reckless than the others. Rasta grew quieter. Scar limped from an old injury that never healed. The power they had built with yesterday's brutality now felt more like a fading memory than a living force. Their movements became fewer. They were no longer seeking expansion, but protection of what little remained. Yet new threats were already creeping toward them. Young coalitions began testing their strength. Roars of unfamiliar males echoed from beyond the borders, louder and more challenging than before. The wild no longer feared the Mapogo as it once did. Though they were still seen as legends of strength, the cracks in their ranks were undeniable. Pretty Boy felt it, as if the land itself whispered the calm before the storm. It was no longer about blood, it was about legacy. And as he patrolled the edges of his kingdom, he realized that the shadows closing in were not from outside, but from time itself. They had ruled for a long time. Now their turn had come to face the brutality of stronger, tougher enemies. In a battle that would decide their fate, maybe not now, but soon. The downfall began when Kinky Tail, who had separated from the others, was ambushed by a rival coalition. Though he fought fiercely, he was alone, and they were many. His body was found torn, lifeless. Mr. T responded with fiery rage. He returned alone to avenge his brother, and succeeded in killing one of the attackers, regaining some of his pride. But it wasn't long before he too was surrounded by enemies. He fought to his last breath, roaring until his voice fell silent forever. The Mapogo were now 4. News of 2 deaths spread quickly. Many lions were emboldened to attack the remaining members, especially after the death of the coalition's most savage member, Mr. T. Soon. A new coalition emerged, called the Majinjalane. 4 strong young males who followed in the Mapogo's footsteps, but with youthful hunger and modern warfare tactics. Pretty Boy felt the glory starting to turn against them. Their dominance was beginning to shrink. Then Rasta suddenly disappeared, likely killed in a skirmish. Soon after, Scar vanished as well. Whether he died or chose exile, no one knew. Only 2 remained, Pretty Boy and Makulu. They roamed together through the remnants of their former kingdom. They were no longer kings, but ghosts. moving silently, avoiding conflict, living on instinct and memory. Pretty Boy no longer sought battle. He sought refuge, peace, a place of safety. But the fierce Majingalain lions had begun to close in. They were strong, young, and more united than the Mapogo had ever been. Gradually, they took over the prides the Mapogo once ruled. The lionesses shifted their loyalty. Even the land itself seemed to forget who once walked it. Still, Pretty Boy didn't flee far from his former kingdom. He moved silently, choosing solitude over war. After facing death countless times, he now chose life. Their downfall wasn't caused by a single battle, but by a slow collapse of everything they had once built. Pretty Boy didn't survive through strength, but through isolation and extreme caution. He outlived all his brothers. He lived to see the rise and fall of the empire they once built, a force that had terrified everyone. He escaped death more than once, and now he roamed the wild as the shadow of a legend. No pride, no land, no kingdom, but he had preserved his life. In a world where strength is often measured by an early death, survival became the real reward. New lands fell under the rule of the Majingalain lions. Their roars filled the night. Their scent marked what was once Mapogo territory. But Pretty Boy had learned something none of them yet knew: how to survive, how to live after glory. He hunted when he could, avoided conflict when needed, and stayed on the move. Some lionesses from his old pride still remembered him, even let him approach. The cubs looked at him with curiosity, unaware of who he once was. He didn't need to reclaim a throne. The throne was already gone. What he carried now was something different: knowledge, wisdom, and awareness. The savannah quieted around him. Seasons changed. Rain fell and evaporated. Grass withered and bloomed again. Prey herds migrated across the plains, and Pretty Boy followed from afar. He no longer chased power, he simply existed, with caution and survival instinct. From time to time, he faced younger males. Some challenged him, most ignored him. He fought only when he had to, and rarely with the fierceness of his youth. The years had changed him. His body was leaner, scarred, but in his eyes still sparkled that flame from his younger days. Sometimes he returned to the places he once ruled: the water holes where battles had been fought, the trees where cubs once played, the borders he had marked with his roars. No one recognized him anymore. To them, he was just another lone male, lost. But in the wind, in the rustle of the grass, echoes remained. Faint, perhaps, but real. He had walked through fire, built an empire, lost everything, and still he lived. There were no celebrations waiting for him, no grand return, only a slow journey into the silence he had chosen. In his final days, Pretty Boy walked the edges of forgotten lands. His body slowed, his roar softened, but his eyes still held that same passion for life. Maybe he was no longer the lion he once was, but he was not broken. He entered a new phase of existence, one no longer ruled by dominance, but by wisdom and awareness. He could sense danger before seeing it, move without being seen, preserve energy, let go of things lions usually fight to the death for. He had no pride to defend, no cubs to protect, no land to claim. He had nothing left to prove. Pretty Boy lived for a short time beside a quiet waterhole, visited only by antelope and a few old lionesses. There he found moments of rest, moments of peace. He lay beneath the same stars that once lit his path as a king. In a world that never stops fighting, Pretty Boy became an unforgettable ghost. Despite his long wandering, narrow escapes, withdrawal from war, and solitary walks without fear, his day came. He passed beneath the shade of a tree. No audience, no final roar. He left with the wind, with the dust, leaving behind endless memories. He may not have left a kingdom, or cubs, or a pride bearing his name, but the wild carried his legacy in its plains and hills, as a lion who survived what others couldn't. His story traveled through the savannah, through lionesses who lay beside him, and through the memories of the Mapogo era. Young lions who came after him never saw him, but they lived in a world he and his coalition helped shape. A world still marked by the fearsome imprint of the Mapogo coalition and the thrilling, intense details of their lives as one of the greatest lion coalitions ever known. In the end, Pretty Boy wasn't the loudest, nor the most savage or destructive, but he was the one who remained. And in the wild, it is the one who remains who tells the greatest stories.
Dear viewers, welcome. The time, March 1898. The place, Kenya, east of the famous Mount Kilimanjaro in the harsh Tsavo Desert. This is where it all began. Terrifying stories were passed down, and tragic news spread of men who met their end in the jaws of two of the fiercest lions of the time, who alone were responsible for the deaths of up to 135 people, leaving behind images of the victims and the immense tragedy that befell them. Throughout history, Tsavo lions were known as some of the fiercest man-eating types. Despite being smaller than their Serengeti counterparts who lived up the mountain, likely due to their harsh, resource-scarce environment. It was also said that these lions were usually found in small prides, often with only one male for mating, who held exclusive breeding rights. In contrast, most other prides included many lionesses and at least two males. As the slave trade routes developed through Tsavo, Kenya, many traders forcefully marched their captives across the barren lands. Due to the extreme heat, one of the slaves often died along the way, left behind as easy prey for predators. Many believe this gave the Tsavo lions an early taste for human flesh. The tragedy began when a team of Indian workers led by British Lieutenant Colonel John Henry Patterson arrived in Kenya to build a bridge over the Tsavo River as part of the Kenya-Uganda Railway project. It seemed doomed from the start. As Bruce Patterson wrote in his book, The Lions of Tsavo, few men at the end of the railway knew that the name itself was a warning. Tsavo meant place of slaughter in the local language, referring to the killings committed by the Maasai people, who often attacked weaker tribes and slaughtered their men, long seen as an omen of doom by other communities. Shortly after John Henry Patterson and his team began construction, a worker went missing. After searching, his mutilated body was found. Fearing that a lion was responsible, Patterson, realizing the looming danger, set out the next day to stop the horror and track the beast. Instead, he found more bodies, men from earlier missions whose stories had been buried with them. The next day, another of Patterson's men vanished. By April, the number of missing had risen to 17. And that was just the beginning. The killings continued for months, with the clever, elusive lions outwitting every fence, barrier, and trap set up to stop them, causing hundreds of workers to flee and halting bridge construction. The lion attacks devastated the camp. No one could stop the massacres, especially since they often happened at night, when the hungry beasts stalked the workers relentlessly. Screams pierced the night as these savage predators dragged men from their tents into the wild. Most reports claimed 135 people were eaten by the two lions that year. But the company, eager to downplay the incident and avoid inflating the numbers, officially declared only around 30 workers missing. The violence didn't end until January of that year, when Patterson finally hunted the lions down. It wasn't easy. He built thorn barriers, lit night fires, and imposed curfews. Still, The attacks continued, leading fearful workers to believe in curses and even rebel against Patterson. It took Patterson months to kill the terrifying pair of African lions, who had grown massive from gorging on human flesh during months of slaughter. Patterson was instantly hailed as a hero for ending the brutal crime spree and praised around the world. Once the threat was gone, bridge work resumed and the workers finally regained confidence. The project was completed in February 1899. As a historical memento of the massacre, Patterson kept the lions' skins and skulls. In 1907, he published a best-selling book, The Man-Eaters of Tsavo. A quarter-century later, the skins and bones were sold to Chicago's Field Museum, where they were mounted and displayed to the public as legendary monsters. But the story didn't end there. Bruce Patterson, zoologist and Field Museum curator, spent years studying the lions. Chemical tests on their hair keratin and bone collagen confirmed they had eaten human flesh in the months before being shot. The tests also revealed one lion had eaten 11 people and the other 24, making the actual death toll just 35, far less than Patterson's claim of 135. In 2009, Nathaniel J. Dominy, associate professor of anthropology at UC Santa Cruz, said, "It was a historical mystery for years, and now the contradiction has finally been addressed. We can imagine the railway company had reasons to downplay the deaths, and Patterson may have had motives to exaggerate them." A second study revealed the lion who ate more people had dental disease, a bad jaw, and skull damage. He likely turned to eating humans out of desperation. Meanwhile, there was a noticeable decline in other prey, mainly elephants. So when humans entered the area, they became easy alternative meals. Although we know more today about the truth of the Tsavo lions, they remain mythical symbols of their era. As Bruce Patterson told the Chicago Tribune in 2009, the Tsavo lions' remarkable achievement was that they halted the British Empire at the height of its power in Tsavo. The story of the Tsavo lions became legend, told as a tale of courage and survival. But more importantly, it's a reminder that nature can be cruel and unpredictable, and that no matter how advanced mankind becomes, he remains vulnerable to untamable forces. If we take a contemplative look around the world and gather enough data to survey the types of cats spread across the globe, we'll find many species, large and small, tame and deadly. But if we look to identify the most ferocious and powerful types, we'll find, in certain regions, cats known for their skill, dominance, and ferocity. In the Americas, we find cougars and jaguars. In Africa, there are lions and leopards, while in Asia, tigers and leopards dominate. But when you turn your gaze to Australia, you won't find any big cats there. For several reasons we'll explore in this exciting episode, where we'll imagine the presence of one of the most feared felines among its kind, one of the most capable predators on the planet, the lion. If we assume its presence, we'll be faced with several crucial questions about life across the isolated continent, such as, would the presence of lions destroy Australia's entire ecosystem? How would lions adapt to a new world? And what would it mean for all the native species already living there? Let's begin by learning about the land known as Australia. As mentioned, there are no big cats there. No tigers, no lions, no jaguars, no leopards, no snow leopards, no cheetahs, no cougars, not even lynxes, caracals, or ocelots. There were reports of American soldiers arriving in Australia during World War II who brought cougars and leopards as companion animals. Perhaps some of these cats were released into the wild, but if so, their numbers were clearly limited. There's no trace of them today. In fact, Australia is home to some of the most unique species in the world, thanks to its isolation from other continents. It's famously known as the land of kangaroos, wallabies, wombats, and koalas, and rightly so. It also hosts many unique mammals and is the only place on Earth that contains all three kinds of mammals: placentals, monotremes, and marsupials. Among its predators is the dingo, the continent's only native wild dog. There are dozens of giant venomous snakes and spiders. If we told you the actual number, it might send chills down your spine. And let's not forget, Australia is full of deadly crocodiles. Both freshwater and saltwater species live here. These crocodiles dominate the northern regions of Australia, which are considered extremely dangerous. The further south you go, the less common they become due to the cooler climate. Crocodiles prefer to stay near warm water. Australia lies close to the equator. Its northern parts sit around 9 degrees south, stretching to about 44 degrees south, where the weather becomes colder. That's why Australia has such a diverse landscape: tropical rainforests, mountain ranges, remote inland areas, and deserts in the semi-arid interior. The outback is sparsely populated, with just about 3.4 people per square kilometer, equivalent to around 0.6 people per square mile. So, don't expect to see more than 7 people in every square mile of those vast areas. That's why most of Australia's population lives along the coast or nearby, where conditions are more suitable for humans. So now that we've understood the nature and climate of this continent, we must consider how to gather some lions and prepare to transport them. Let's head out on an exciting journey to Africa to obtain some of these lions. Africa shares many similarities with Australia. One of them is the diversity of habitats, including tropical rainforests, mountain regions, and deserts. Northern Australia lies near the equator, while the equator cuts through Central Africa. When we examine where lions live, we find they mainly inhabit sub-Saharan Africa, avoiding the vast desert. But the areas they do occupy are not tropical rainforests. Lions live in savannas, grasslands, and even dry plains, so they are well adapted to dry heat. They can also be found in mountainous areas, living at elevations up to 3,600 meters on Mount Elgon, along the Uganda-Kenya border, and even near the snow line of Mount Kenya. Therefore, in Australia, lions would likely avoid dense rainforests since they're not their preferred habitat. But they would thrive in the drier regions. The areas lions naturally inhabit rarely dip below 20 degrees Celsius, even in colder months, and they're accustomed to daytime temperatures between 26 degrees Celsius and 30 degrees Celsius. Due to these factors, lions prefer to stay near a permanent water source, but also require ample shade. They spend a lot of time in direct sunlight, so they need cover when necessary. They also prefer dense vegetation, like shrubs and tall grass, vital for hunting. Calling lions killers is no exaggeration. They must hunt to survive. Lions are large carnivores and need substantial meals. So how do you feed a predator that can weigh up to 225 kilograms? Lions prefer large-hoofed mammals, especially zebras, antelopes, gazelles, and buffaloes. These prey typically weigh between 225 and 900 kilograms. And lions don't usually eat alone. There's often a hungry pride to feed. A lion pride may consist of 6, 10, 15, or even more members. That's why they prefer larger prey for the whole group. However, if needed, lions can feed on smaller animals like warthogs, turtles, birds, rabbits, lizards, and mice. Usually, the females do most of the hunting, while males protect the pride and its territory. Lions must deal with rival predators trying to intrude and steal prey, such as hyenas, leopards, cheetahs, African wild dogs, and even other lions. But lions rarely struggle with these predators. They're larger and stronger than all of them. None of them can sneak up on an alert lion. And even if they manage to steal some food and flee, only a few escape the jaws of a killer lion. The only real threat to be wary of is the crocodile. Lions in Africa are very familiar with the thin-snouted West African crocodiles and the Nile crocodile. Nile crocodiles have terrifying bites, up to 2 tons of pressure per square inch. So lions have learned to approach water cautiously and leave quickly after drinking. Now that we've gathered enough information, let's assemble the lion group, say around 12 of them, and head toward Australia. We'll fly southeast across the Indian Ocean to deliver the prize safely. Upon landing, the lions begin to explore the new land. As they adapt, they discover many areas that resemble their native habitat, tropical rainforests they'd likely avoid, mountainous zones, open plains, and vast outback regions. All these regions are strikingly similar to the African savannas and grasslands. And since these areas are sparsely populated, that's perfect for the lions, just like much of the land they once ruled in Africa. So far, things are looking very good. As the lions explore more, they'll find water sources, cover for hunting, and shade to rest. Lions are already used to being apex predators, but they knew back in Africa that they had competition from other predators eager for prey and ready to steal kills. But in Australia, after surveying their surroundings, they'll realize there are no competing big cats, no hyenas, only dingoes, which are similar to African wild dogs. With competition reduced by about 25%, things just got a lot easier. As for crocodiles dominating the waters and sometimes venturing onto land, the lions will need to tread more carefully around these reptiles. Fortunately, they're already trained to avoid them. The real problem for lions lies in the scarcity of their favorite meals. Large hoofed mammals simply don't exist in Australia. The continent has been separated from the others for so long that many placental mammals never fully developed here. For this group of lions, their best options might be wallabies, wombats, koalas, birds, and lizards. But these are far smaller than the animals lions usually eat. They may feed one lion, but not a whole pride. That means they'll need to work harder to get meals, and not everyone will share. Survival will belong to the fittest. There are some larger wild pigs, and of course, kangaroos. But kangaroos are a tricky case. Some are quite large, and they fight back. Literally, they punch. Lions may not enjoy hunting prey that resists, but they may have no choice and will eventually chase kangaroos too. Still, nothing compares to zebras or buffaloes for them. Over time, if the lion group continues adapting, thriving, and reproducing, African lions will remain larger than their Australian-born counterparts, who would shrink due to food scarcity. As for all the small marsupials, kangaroos, and wild pigs, they'll have to adapt to their new predator. They'll face a life-or-death struggle against a ruthless, ever-hungry beast. On the other hand, if the lions fail to adapt to the harsh conditions of Australia, their survival will hinge on food availability. If they struggle to find enough, they'll suffer great losses, brutal conflict, and hunger, ultimately leading to their extinction on the continent.